I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped outside and saw a crowd gathered at the edge of my lake while members of the HOA stood there waving clipboards like they were about to seize territory. But nothing prepared me for what their president, a sharp-tongued woman named Marlene, shouted as soon as she spotted me walking toward them. "We're taking control of the lake effective immediately," she barked. "It belongs to the HOA, and so do the docks." That was the moment I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding, this was a takeover attempt. Before I could even respond, homeowners started whispering, some confused, others excited. The HOA was known for overreaching, but trying to claim the entire lake? That was a new level of insanity. Marlene marched up to me with a smirk plastered on her face. "You've been using HOA property without authorization," she accused. "Those docks, every single one, belong to us." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the truth was so much bigger, so much wilder, than anything they imagined. See, what Marlene didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had something they couldn't fight, a set of secret files I'd inherited years earlier. Faded documents sealed in plastic sleeves, tucked away in an old cedar chest. Documents that proved ownership of not just my property, but every dock surrounding the lake. And not in a vague, symbolic way. I mean legally recorded, county certified, tax documented ownership. If the HOA wanted a battle, they'd pick the wrong opponent. But I didn't reveal that just yet. Instead, I let them dig their own grave. I watched as Marlene strutted along the shoreline, pointing at docks and shouting orders at the landscapers she'd hired without permission. I watched the neighbors' reactions: shock, anger, disbelief. And I felt the tension build like a storm rolling in. Then Marlene made her final mistake. She stood on the main dock, jabbed a finger at me, and announced, "You will remove your belongings by the end of the week, or we'll remove them for you." The crowd gasped. Some even cheered. But me? I just smiled. Because that dock she was standing on, the one she claimed belonged to the HOA, it legally belonged to me. And I had the files to prove it. As the crowd murmured, I took a slow breath, letting the moment settle. The truth was, these documents weren't just pieces of paper, they were a map of forgotten agreements, old land deals, and property lines drawn long before the HOA ever existed. And now, with the HOA overstepping so boldly, those files were about to become my strongest weapon. Their arrogance made everything even easier for me. The morning after the confrontation, I woke up to the sound of hammering, sharp, rapid strikes echoing across the lake like warning shots. For a moment, I thought someone was repairing a dock. But when I stepped outside, I saw the truth. The HOA had posted bright orange "Property of the HOA" signs on every single dock around the shoreline, including mine. Marlene stood proudly beside her little army of volunteers, clipboard in hand, acting like she was directing a military takeover. Neighbors were gathered in clusters, whispering furiously, some siding with the HOA, others glaring at the signs in disbelief. One man muttered, "They can't do this, can they?" Another snapped back, "They'll do whatever they think they can get away with." And that was exactly it. The HOA wasn't enforcing rules. They were testing boundaries. I walked toward them, calm but angry enough that my steps carried weight. Marlene spotted me and raised her chin triumphantly. "Good morning," she said in a tone that made the words feel like an insult. "As you can see, we're formalizing ownership of the lakeside structures. These docks are now officially under HOA management." "Based on what authority?" I asked. She tapped her clipboard. "We have bylaws, homeowner agreements, and majority board approval. That's all the authority we need." I smiled. Actually, it isn't. That caught her off guard, but she quickly regained her smugness. "If you have concerns, you can file a complaint with the board," she said. "But it won't change anything." She had no idea how wrong she was. I didn't reveal the documents yet. Timing was everything. Instead, I asked, Did you verify ownership records before taking this step? Her smirk faltered for half a second, just long enough for me to know she hadn't. Behind us, a couple of neighbors approached. "Marlene, is this even legal?" one of them asked. She snapped, "The board has full jurisdiction." Then, turning to me, she added, "And you need to remove your boat from our dock by Friday." Our dock. She kept saying it. But the truth was printed in ink older than her entire HOA. "I'll gladly discuss ownership," I said, "but you might want to stop posting signs on private property until you've seen the real documentation." She scoffed. "There is no real documentation. The HOA controls the lake. That's final." I nodded slowly. "Then I guess it's time I show everyone what you've overlooked." Her eyes narrowed, curiosity mixing with fear. She knew I wasn't bluffing, but she didn't know how bad it was going to get for her. Because the moment those documents appeared, everything she claimed would crumble. I didn't bring out the documents immediately. Instead, I let the tension simmer for another day, long enough for the HOA to get cocky, but not long enough for them to start tearing anything down. On the following afternoon, while the sun was still bright and the lake shimmered like glass, I made my move. If Marlene wanted a showdown, I would give her one in front of every witness possible. I called for an emergency community meeting on the shoreline. At first, most people came out of curiosity, some expecting drama, others hoping for answers. Even a couple of off-duty police officers who lived nearby showed up, standing with arms crossed, waiting to see what all the noise was about. But the person I wanted most to show up arrived last, stomping down the path with her usual storm cloud expression, Marlene. She shoved her way through the crowd. "Why are you gathering people without HOA approval?" she demanded. I ignored her question. Instead, I pulled out a large, weathered binder, thick, yellowed at the edges, and sealed with tape from decades ago. The murmurs began instantly. Marlene's eyes narrowed. "What is that supposed to be?" "This," I said clearly, lifting it so everyone could see, "is the reason the HOA has absolutely zero claim over the lake or any of its docks." The silence was so complete you could hear the breeze ripple across the water. I opened the binder to the first page, a notarized land deed dated nearly 60 years earlier. Gasps rippled through the crowd as I flipped through each page. Property descriptions. Boundary maps. Signatures from the original developers. County tax records. Every page told the same story: the land beneath the lake, and the structures attached to it, were privately owned long before the HOA was ever created. Someone whispered, "Wait, he owns all the docks." Another neighbor leaned in. "This is legit. Those are real county seals." Marlene tried to step closer, reaching for the binder. "Let me see that." I snapped it shut before she could touch it. "You'll see it when the full package is delivered to the county office and the HOA board after I make certified copies." Her face went pale. "This doesn't prove anything," she sputtered. But she knew it did. One of the off-duty officers stepped forward. "Actually," he said calmly, "if these records check out, the HOA has no authority to mark or manage any of this." The crowd murmured again, louder this time. Marlene took a shaky breath. "You can't just claim ownership of every dock." I opened to the page she feared most, a map with every dock outlined under the same recorded parcel. "I'm not claiming it," I said. "I'm proving it." She stared at the binder like it was a bomb about to go off. Because for her, it was. The moment the crowd saw the map, every dock neatly outlined in the same parcel number, you could practically feel the ground shift beneath Marlene's feet. Her confidence evaporated, replaced by a stiff, trembling disbelief. She looked like someone whose entire castle had been built on sand, and the tide had finally come in. But she wasn't done fighting. "This is fraudulent," she snapped, turning toward the neighbors as if searching for someone to back her up. "He created these documents. Anyone can forge old papers." I didn't react. I simply pulled out the final page, the one the previous owner had handwritten a note on decades ago. It read, recorded with County Office on April 12, 1964. Lakefront structures remain under private deed ownership. Underneath was a reference number and signature. One of the off-duty police officers leaned in. "Ma'am, that's a legit recording number. We can check it in 5 minutes." Marlene froze. Someone in the crowd called out, so the HOA tried to take something that wasn't theirs. Another added, they were threatening him based on nothing. The grumbling spread like wildfire. HOA members who once stood proudly behind Marlene now quietly stepped away, suddenly unsure whether they wanted to be associated with the disaster unraveling in front of them. Marlene tried regaining control. "Everyone calm down. Even if these documents are real, which I doubt, the HOA still has rights to manage lake access and enforce rules." I lifted another sheet. Actually, according to the county's original development agreement, the HOA was never granted water rights. They only manage common land, not submerged land or attached structures. I flipped the page toward the crowd. "And guess what docks are? Attached structures." It hit her like a slap. Neighbors were now whispering loudly, no longer intimidated by the HOA, no longer hesitant to voice their frustration. This explains why the HOA's bylaws never mentioned the docks. So all the fines they threatened us with weren't even legal. They've been overstepping for years. The heat of embarrassment crawled up Marlene's neck. She tried one last desperate line. "The board will fight this. We have legal resources." I didn't even have to respond. One of the neighbors held up a phone. "Too late. I just called the county office. They said if the documents match the record number, the docks legally belong to him." Marlene's eyes widened. "You called them already?" "And," the neighbor added, "they're sending someone to verify." That was it. The end. The unraveling of her power was happening faster than she could breathe. Marlene backed away, shaking her head. "This isn't over," she whispered, but no one believed her. Her authority had shattered. Because the truth wasn't just out, it was undeniable. The county representative arrived faster than anyone expected. A tan SUV rolled up along the gravel path beside the lake, and out stepped a middle-aged man in a blue windbreaker carrying a metal clipboard. His calm, methodical presence instantly quieted the crowd. Even the kids who'd been splashing near the shore stopped to watch. He introduced himself simply, "I'm Daniels. County Land Records." Marlene practically lunged toward him, desperate. "Thank goodness you're here. We have a homeowner claiming he owns every dock on the lake. It's absurd and completely fabricated. Please put an end to this." Daniels didn't react. He didn't even look at her. "Where are the documents?" he asked, scanning the crowd until his eyes met mine. I stepped forward and handed him the binder. Daniels opened it without ceremony, flipping through the pages with expert precision. Each time he reached a map or sealed form, he paused, studying it closely. The crowd watched every movement like it was a televised investigation. After a few minutes, he asked, "Do you have the parcel reference number noted anywhere else?" I pointed to the final page. "Right there. Original recording number from 1964. Daniels nodded, typed the number into a small tablet he'd brought, and waited. The loading bar seemed to take an eternity. Everyone held their breath, everyone except Marlene, who paced behind him like a caged animal. When the results finally loaded, Daniel's eyebrows lifted slightly. That was the first sign. He turned to face the crowd. "These documents," he began slowly, "match the original county records exactly." A ripple of gasps spread across the lakeside. Daniels continued, raising his voice so everyone could hear. "The submerged land under this lake was privately deeded before the creation of the HOA. That deed includes all attached structures, meaning docks. Every dock surrounding this lake is legally under the ownership of the original parcel holder." He looked at me. Which is now you? Marlene's knees nearly buckled. No, no, that can't be right, she whispered. Daniels wasn't done. Furthermore, he added, any attempt to claim ownership, post signage, issue fines, or restrict access to these docks is unlawful. The HOA has no jurisdiction here. A wave of shock swept the crowd, followed by relief, satisfaction, even a few laughs at the absurdity of what the HOA had tried to pull. One neighbor shouted, so all the threats were illegal. Daniels nodded. Correct. Marlene stumbled backward, shaking her head. We were acting in the community's best interest. By breaking the law, another neighbor snapped back. Daniels closed the binder and handed it to me. If the HOA continues interference, he said calmly, contact us immediately. The county will issue a formal order. That was the moment everything truly changed. Marlene wasn't just defeated. She was exposed. You would think the county's ruling would have been the end of it. You would think Marlene and the HOA board would crawl back into their meeting room, lick their wounds, and accept defeat. But people like Marlene don't accept defeat. They deny it. They twist it. They cling to whatever scraps of control they can find. And within 24 hours, she proved exactly that. The next morning, I woke to find a folded letter taped to my front door printed on official HOA stationery, dripping with legal terminology they clearly didn't understand. The letter claimed the HOA was issuing a temporary injunction to prevent me from exercising sole control of lake structures. It demanded I stop using my own dock until the HOA could review my claims. I laughed out loud. It was the most desperate, amateur attempt at authority I'd ever seen. Right as I finished reading it, my neighbor Greg jogged over from across the lawn. Did you see this garbage? He said, waving an identical letter. She put them on everyone's doors last night. I nodded. She's grasping at straws. Greg leaned in. People are furious. She's holding an emergency meeting at the community center tonight. Says it's mandatory. Of course she was. When a tyrant loses power, they don't step down, they double down. That evening, I walked into the community center to find a full house. Neighbors filled every seat, others standing along the walls. A giant projector screen displayed a slide titled Urgent Community Action, Lake Rights in Jeopardy. And right at the front stood Marlene, wearing her official name tag and clenching a stack of papers so hard her knuckles had gone white. She launched into a dramatic speech the moment I entered. Our community is facing a threat, she declared. A single homeowner is attempting to seize control of a shared natural resource. We cannot allow this. The HOA exists to protect you from exactly this kind of overreach. The hypocrisy was incredible. I waited until she finished her monologue before stepping forward. Everything you're saying contradicts the county ruling, I said calmly. You saw the documents. You heard the officer. The HOA never had lake authority. Marlene slammed her fist onto the podium. Those documents are outdated, she shrieked. We're launching our own investigation. I held up my phone. Good. Because the county already emailed me the verification packet. I tapped the screen and projected the email onto the wall behind her. Ownership confirmed. HOA jurisdiction, none. The room erupted. Neighbors began firing questions at her. Why did you lie to us? Why didn't you check the records? You threatened people. You overstepped your authority. Marlene's face flushed crimson as she backed away from the podium. Her control was gone. Her board was silent. And the HOA was collapsing from the inside. The room had become a storm, accusations swirling, neighbors rising from their seats, voices overlapping in a mix of anger, frustration, and disbelief. Marlene stood at the front of the chaos like a ship captain losing control of the wheel. But what she didn't expect was that the first blow wouldn't come from me, it would come from her own board. Her vice president, a stiff, quiet man named Harold, finally stood up. He cleared his throat, and the room gradually fell silent. "Marlene," he began, voice trembling but determined, "you told us the lake was community-owned. You assured us you verified every document before taking action." He gestured toward the projected county email still glowing on the wall. "But this proves we were misled." Marlene spun toward him, eyes flaming. "I did what was necessary. The lake should be under HOA control. It's common sense." "It's not about what should be," Harold snapped, surprising everyone. "It's about what is. And you never bothered to check." He turned to the crowd. "She pushed us to vote on measures she said were legally supported. None of us agreed to threaten residents or post signs on property that wasn't ours." A murmur of support rose in the room, growing louder. Another board member, Sandra, stood next. "We trusted you," she said, her voice thick with betrayal. "But you weaponized that trust to go after someone you didn't like." Marlene swung to her. "You're exaggerating." "No," Sandra cut her off. "You've been targeting people for years, and we let you because we thought you were following the rules. But this," she held up one of the HOA's fake injunction letters. "This is illegal, Marlene." More neighbors nodded, some whispering angrily, others staring in outright disgust. The air felt like it was tightening around her. I stepped forward, not to attack her, but to give the final reality check she needed. "All of this could have been avoided if you had just talked to me. One conversation. That's it. But instead, you tried to bully your way into ownership." Marlene's voice cracked. "You think you're the victim? You think you can parade in here and turn everyone against me?" "They turned on you," Greg said from the back of the room, "the moment they learned the truth. Then came the moment no one expected." Harold sighed deeply and faced the crowd. "I'm calling for a board vote." The room hushed instantly. A vote to remove Marlene as HOA president, effective immediately. Gasps broke out. Marlene stumbled backward, shaking her head violently. "You can't, no, you can't do this to me. I built this HOA." But the board members raised their hands, one by one. Harold. Sandra. Two others. A unanimous vote. Marlene had been dethroned. She stood frozen, eyes hollow, mouth trembling, as the room erupted in relieved applause. Her reign was over. The next morning, I woke up to what looked like a battlefield outside my window. 3 HOA board members were standing at the edge of the lake, clipboards in hand, whispering furiously while pointing at each dock like they were mapping out an invasion strategy. The president wasn't with them, but her absence only made me more uneasy. She was planning something. I could feel it. My phone buzzed before I could even grab coffee. "Attorney, they filed a complaint at the county office at 7:12 a.m. Don't respond." "I'm headed there now." "A complaint? Already?" I stepped onto the porch just as the treasurer, now visibly nervous, broke away from the group and approached me. He held a piece of paper like it was radioactive. "We're, conducting an official HOA investigation," he said, voice cracking. "You may be in violation of multiple shoreline ordinances." I let him finish. Then I smiled. "Your HOA is dissolved," I reminded him. "You don't have the authority to run an investigation." His face flushed so red I thought he might pass out. "We're working on reinstating it," he stammered. "Our president is handling it." Of course she was. But the moment he hurried away, my phone lit up again. "Attorney, just got word. They're trying to reinstate the HOA retroactively. Illegal. I'm stopping it." I didn't even know retroactively reinstating an HOA was a thing, probably because it wasn't. But the president was clearly desperate. She wasn't trying to lead the neighborhood anymore. She was trying to salvage her ego. The attorney arrived at my house an hour later, papers in hand, jaw tight. They're panicking, he said, stepping inside. So they're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. False complaints. Fake violations. They even tried to claim your docks are a public common area. I burst out laughing. Public? I have the deed. They're hoping you'll be too exhausted to fight, he replied. But don't worry. I've already filed a cease and desist order. But the real bombshell dropped at noon. The county inspector, someone I'd known for years, showed up unannounced. He walked straight up to me, clipboard in hand, and whispered. I'm only here because they forced a request through. Off the record? They're in trouble. Big trouble. We walked toward the first dock, and the inspector shook his head at every accusation. No violations. No damage. No environmental issues. Nothing. As he checked the final dock, he turned to me. They're weaponizing the system. But the system caught them red-handed. Before I could respond, a car screeched to a stop at the end of my driveway. The HOA president stepped out. And she looked absolutely unhinged. Her eyes locked on me. You think you've won, she snarled. You haven't even seen what I'm capable of. The inspector stepped between us. And in that moment, I knew things were about to escalate far beyond anything I'd imagined. The HOA president's words hung in the air like a threat wrapped in gasoline. Even the inspector stiffened. She marched toward us, heels stabbing the gravel with sharp, angry crunches. Her face was blotched red, hair frizzed from stress, and she clutched a binder so tightly her knuckles turned white. You two think you can undermine a legally recognized association, she snapped, practically shaking. We have power. We have jurisdiction. And you, she pointed at me with a trembling finger, you're nothing but a rule breaker who thinks he's smarter than the rest of us. The inspector calmly raised a hand. Ma'am, I need you to take a step back. That only made her explode. I will not, she screamed. Those docks belong to this community. They always have. I don't care what paperwork he forged. Forged. I barked out a laugh. You're the one filing fake claims and resurrecting a dissolved HOA. She blinked rapidly, caught off guard that I said it so plainly. The inspector cleared his throat. Mrs. Carter, I finished my inspection. All docks comply with state regulations. They are privately owned. You have no authority. She cut him off with a shrill, shut up. But the damage was done. Her eyes darted around, as if searching for someone to back her up. The treasurer and secretary had been watching from a distance, but the moment she turned toward them, they both dropped their clipboards and pretended to inspect a patch of grass. They weren't going to save her. They couldn't. Finally, she snapped. You know what, she hissed, flipping open her binder. I'm reporting all of this. To the county. To the state. To whoever needs to hear it. You won't win. The inspector sighed. Ma'am, the county already contacted you this morning. You ignored their warning. If you continue this harassment, you'll be facing civil penalties. She froze. For the first time, she looked unsure. What penalties? Up to $5,000 per false filing, he replied. Her face drained of color. Then, something inside her cracked. She let out a bitter, defeated laugh, tossed her binder into her car, and pointed at me like she wanted to burn a hole through my skull. This isn't over, she spat. People like you always get what's coming. She slammed her door and peeled out of my driveway so fast she kicked up a cloud of dust. The inspector watched her disappear, then turned to me with a sympathetic look. She's not going to win, he said. She's backed herself into a corner. I nodded, but a thought gnawed at me. People who are losing don't always quit. Sometimes, they get reckless. And the HOA president had just crossed into reckless territory.